Why can female supporting characters only be sidekicks, while the female lead can win everyone's love? This woman transmigrated into a novel. The book tells the story of Catherine, a poor and kind-hearted female lead who captivated 5 men, but she didn't become the female lead. Who could survive such a cold winter? Eve reached out to pat Haley's head. The two of them were having a great time. Cashin quickly interjected, "I guess you must be very upset, so I came to comfort you." But Eve wasn't buying it at all. "Then you've wasted your time. Breaking off the engagement means nothing to me." Cashin suddenly stood up. "The reason I got engaged to you was that I never thought I'd meet my true love. Now, except for Catherine, I won't marry anyone else." He thought he must be out of his mind. "What am I supposed to bless your union?" Cashin didn't catch Eve's sarcasm. He reached out to her and said loudly, "That's right, I want you to give your blessing to Catherine and me." The man before her was utterly shameless. He had a fiancée but fell in love with someone else. After breaking off the engagement, he asked his ex-fiancée to bless them. Cashin was still talking about Eve blessing them. Eve thought he was truly shameless. Did he even know what he was saying? Cashin slowly approached Eve, then he reached out and lifted her chin. "Because your father withdrew his investment in the mining project, I'd been having a tough time lately." Cashin brushed Eve's hair and leaned in close to her face. "If you're willing to help me, I can give you anything except the position of crown princess." Hearing his words, Eve understood, so this was why he had come to find her. Then Eve asked the maid to put the wood in the fireplace. The maid was confused about what this meant. In the eastern part of the kingdom, there was a magic crystal mine. With the support of Eve's father, Duke Oberon, Cashin had been able to successfully launch the mining project. This had given him an absolute advantage in his competition with the crown prince. However, after they broke off the engagement, Oberon had withdrawn his investment. Eve frowned deeply. She really hadn't expected Cashin to come all this way for an investment. Didn't he realize that Oberon would never listen to his daughter? You hadn't even spoken yet when Haley, in his dog form, started barking loudly. This startled Cashin so much that he fell to the ground. Eve leaned close to Haley's ear and whispered, "Was that your magic just now?" Haley looked fierce. Who else could it be? Cashin, completely unaware of what had just happened, looked at Eve in confusion. Eve spoke calmly, "Your Highness, I don't understand why you're offering such a trade. Your body holds no attraction for me whatsoever." Eve flashed an incredibly sarcastic smile. "Rather than coming up with these ridiculous tricks, you'd be better off just begging me." Upon hearing her words, Cashin stormed out, fuming with anger. Eve watched his retreating figure with a pleased smile. "No need to see you out." But Cashin had barely taken a few steps when his legs gave way and he collapsed to the ground. This startled all the guards. Haley smirked, waiting for Eve's praise. "I did well, didn't I?" Without hesitation, Eve planted a kiss right on his face. "Thank you," she said, then walked towards Cashin, leaving Haley blushing furiously where he stood. Eve quickly reassured her, "Don't worry, I have my own cheat code." After the maid placed the wood, she drew the curtains and left. Eve looked at Cashin's pathetic state. Her mood greatly improved. "Your Highness must be having a tough time lately. You've already fallen once, but I suppose it can't be helped. It's not your fault your legs are weak. Keep at it." This man was such a contradiction. He was actually a bloodthirsty demon. Yet he willingly suppressed his desires for a woman. Now Eve sat on the sofa, stretching lazily. Looking at the exquisite desserts before her, she felt utterly content. Haley lay on her lap playing with her hair. "I'm so envious, I can't feel happy at all." Seeing Haley's pouty expression, Eve found it rather amusing. "Ah, this tea is so fragrant." Haley grew even more irritated. "I've told you I'm not happy and you won't even show me any concern." Eve sipped her tea, not even sparing him a glance, "Because you keep saying the same things over and over. Every day you talk about wanting to smell blood and urging me to start a war." Haley resignedly nibbled on Eve's hair. "Do you know how frustrating it is to be unsatisfied? Not only did I teach the Crown Prince a lesson for you, but I also had to suppress my urge to kill, yet you pay me no attention." Eve gently pulled her hair from his mouth, calmly stating, "I understand." Hearing her words, Haley looked at Eve expectantly. "So will you let me go on a killing spree?" Eve patted his head as if he were a small dog. "Thank you for everything you've done for me." Haley was very dissatisfied. "What good is verbal praise? You're not really treating me like a dog, are you?" Eve handed him a piece of cake. The room was pitch black, with only Eve left inside. She sat in the chair and slowly called out the name she had once read in the book, Great Mage Haley. "Aside from not satisfying your desire to kill, I haven't mistreated you at all. I order 10 people's worth of food at every meal. Everyone thinks I'm a big eater because of it." Haley sighed helplessly. Since he couldn't kill, he could only vent through eating. Now it was Eve's turn to be confused. Is it really that unbearable not being able to kill? Haley could only patiently explain to her. For demons, killing is like the human appetite. We won't die if we don't kill, but it's more agonizing than death itself. That's why I eat so much every day, but it still doesn't ease my urges. You've suddenly leaned in close to Haley. Curiously, she asked, so besides eating, are there any other ways to relieve your urges? Haley's face turned bright red. Eve kept pestering him with questions. He finally answered, his face still flushed. Any form of pleasure will do. Eve didn't understand what he meant. She looked at Haley and asked, so how do you get pleasure? Would you believe it? This vibrant man before her was actually over 2,000 years old. Haley was at a loss for words. How could he explain such things? So he asked Eve, how old are you? Eve replied that she would come of age after her next birthday. Haley waved his hand dismissively. Never mind then, there's no point explaining these things to a kid like you. He was puzzled. Then how old are you, Haley? Haley held up 2 fingers, smiling as he said, I'm 2,176 years old. He responded with a casual, oh, so you're an old grandpa then. Haley immediately bristled. A demon's age is nothing like a human's. Anyway, you can't help me with this. An hour later, Emma was chattering away incessantly. In the dark forest of Alara lived the vicious carnivorous flying dragons. To prevent them from threatening humans, people would smash their dragon eggs to control their numbers. Alara's military strength was insufficient to deal with these flying dragons, so the royal family would send troops to support them every year. This woman summoned a demon. She originally wanted to ask for a small favor but was forced to sign a lifelong contract. Eve frowned, feeling utterly speechless. If it weren't for this situation, she wouldn't have been able to see Catherine's 2 admirers appearing simultaneously in such a remote area. One of the admirers, Crown Prince Leighton, had an extremely poor relationship with Eve. The other was Rotz, the captain of the Royal Knights, whose relationship with Eve wasn't great either. In the original novel, Rotz looked down on Eve. After all, Eve was a cunning villainess who had attempted to harm Catherine multiple times. However, due to her status, Rotz had never openly confronted her about it. Eve couldn't be bothered to deal with these people. She decided to stay at home and only go out after they had left. However, while accidents may be late, they never failed to show up. A few days later, when she was taking Haley out to the hot springs, she ran into Leighton and Rotz face to face. Leighton greeted Eve, Miss Eve, you're looking quite well lately. Eve felt truly unfortunate. She had only heard from Emma that there was a famous hot spring in Alara, so she wanted to try it out. She had avoided all the banquets to dodge them, but unexpectedly, she ran into them on her way to the hot springs. You felt like crying but had no tears. If only she had known, she wouldn't have gone out. This is the coolest woman I've ever seen. Running into her archenemy while out, she left them speechless with just a few words. At this moment, Eve deeply regretted why she had decided to go out today. Now that they had met face to face, she had no choice but to greet them. I've heard you've been very busy. I didn't expect to run into you here. Leighton smiled mockingly. Before the official battle, we have plenty of time. You've thrown the capital into chaos, yet you're still able to enjoy yourself here. After everything was prepared, Eve slowly called out that name. A black shadow appeared in front of her. Even want to hear what he was saying at all? In her previous life, she had been an ordinary employee, and her skill at slacking off was second to none. So Eve directly ignored Leighton's words and indicated that she understood. If there was nothing else, she would be on her way. Seeing her attitude, Leighton became furious. You nearly cost someone their life, yet you still have the heart to enjoy hot springs. Eve gritted her teeth and sighed. I don't understand. Isn't Catherine still alive and well? Then her tone became very cold. And don't forget, it was the 2 of them who were secretly meeting behind my back. I'm the real victim here. Leighton was stunned. Eve was stating facts, and he had no words to refute. Eve continued, I came to Alara to spend the rest of my life atoning for my sins. Can a bad person have a change of heart? As a prince, you're so extreme and show no tolerance for others. I'm truly worried for the people. I have matters to attend to, so I'll be leaving now. Leighton was left speechless by her words. He realized that treating a woman like this was indeed intolerant, and the real victim was actually Eve. 10 minutes later, Eve finally got to soak in the hot spring as she wished. She couldn't help but sigh at how comfortable it was, but why was Haley staying so far away from her? Haley, crouching on the distant wall, replied that he liked staying there. Eve grinned mischievously. I want to chat with you face to face. Come and join me in the hot spring. Who would have thought that at your age you'd still be shy? These words startled Haley. His face turned a shade of red. He then slowly walked towards Eve. All right, come out now. You didn't understand what he meant. Haley bent down, reached out his hand, and lifted Eve directly. We should head back now. This handsome man before her had lived for over 2,000 years, yet he was still like a Chinabu teenager. Haley directly picked up Eve, who was still soaking in the hot spring. Who are you? Eve smiled happily. Nice to meet you, great mage, or should I call you Demon Haley? Haley stared at Eve silently, her eyes full of curiosity. She suddenly spoke. He slowly put Eve down on the ground. Eve found that she wasn't wet at all. Haley chuckled, this is the power of magic. Although in theory it was just using hot air to evaporate water, it wasn't easy to accomplish. He played along and praised him. Wow, you're practically a hairdryer. Haley was confused. Whose hairdryer? He forgot that he didn't know what a hairdryer was. She could only brush it off casually. It's something that can dry hair. Unexpectedly, Haley misunderstood. He thought people who could do this magic were called hairdryers. So he proudly declared, then I must be the most powerful hairdryer. After all, my magic is unrivaled. Eve couldn't be bothered to explain to him. She could only agree, you're the #1 hairdryer in the universe. It was already night when Haley and Eve returned to the mansion. As soon as they arrived, they saw Rots. Rots nodded at Eve without saying a word, extremely cold. After greeting, Rots turned and left immediately, leaving Eve standing there alone. Haley in his dog form asked with a confused face, that's Rots, right? When Jarrett summoned me back then, his ancestor was also there. Haley found it puzzling. Why? Are all the people in their family so taciturn? Eve agreed. Rot's characteristic is that he's a man of few words. He barely speaks 3 sentences a day. How do you know my name? Eve pursed her lips, not answering her question. Why? Because she was a transmigrator who had read the novel. Haley laughed. Did their family trade their language ability for swordsmanship? Eve felt that Haley seemed to like Rots quite a bit. Haley didn't deny it. I like capable people. Strong humans are interesting. Meanwhile, Eve finished washing up and returned to her room to rest. As soon as she pushed open the door, she found Haley had transformed back in a human form and was sprawled across her bed. You've told him to get down quickly, saying she was exhausted and needed to sleep, but Haley refused. I always sleep on the bed. You've asked Haley to turn into a dog, but he wouldn't. Occupying the bed, he said, I want you to feel what it's like when your needs aren't met. He was very helpless. She had to take a pillow and go sleep on the couch. As soon as her head hit the pillow, she fell into a deep sleep. Haley looked at Eve's sweet sleeping face, and his own face couldn't help but blush again. The one who summoned me, my patience has reached its limit. This handsome man before her was a demon, having not killed for so long. He almost lost control and bit the woman in front of him. Just now, looking at Eve's sweet sleeping face, Haley really couldn't resist anymore. He walked directly to the side of the couch and leaned over each. Eve, with sleepy eyes, asked him what he was doing. Can you stop messing around? I need to sleep. Eve pushed Haley away with her hand. You're too heavy, get up quickly. No matter how you act up, I won't start a war. In the novel, the great mage revered as the hero who founded the country was actually a demon who could control blue fire. As soon as she finished speaking, Haley pinned her down. He stared straight at Eve, his eyes devoid of any emotion. Eve was now completely awake. Something was wrong with Haley. She quickly asked Haley if he was listening to what she was saying. Haley moved closer to Eve's lips, their mouths almost touching. Haley closed his eyes tightly, unable to resist any longer. Then he suddenly bit Eve's neck. Eve was bewildered. She immediately told Haley to get up, but Haley pretended not to hear. He kept nuzzling against her. Suddenly there was a loud thump. Haley held his head, crying out very pitifully. What are you doing? Eve smiled and asked. Are you awake now? Hearing her words, Haley was confused. I didn't do anything. Why did you suddenly hit me? Eve angrily pulled aside her collar, revealing the bite mark Haley had just made. You dare say you didn't do anything? You almost ate me. Haley looked completely bewildered. Is he talking about me? How could there be my tooth marks on your neck? Eve observed Haley's expression. He truly wasn't lying. He had genuinely forgotten what he had just done. In Jelani, it was because he signed a contract with the demon that the demon helped him annihilate all enemy armies, allowing him to establish this empire. However, after the king's death, the great mage disappeared without a trace. Haley spoke, full of resentment. I've reached my limit of tolerance now. I'm not sure what else I might do. Eve replied helplessly, but you still can't eat people. Haley expressed that he couldn't help it. It's been too long since I've killed. This has never happened before. Eve held her head, feeling unlucky. She had almost been eaten by an out-of-control demon. But now she had to think of a solution. If this continued, her life would be in danger. Eve frowned, complaining to Haley, you really are the most troublesome demon in the world. Haley, however, didn't mind her words. Instead, he happily replied, but I'm also the world's best hair dryer. This man was a 2,000-year-old demon. The flying dragons that gave humans such headaches were as easy as cutting vegetables for him. Just now, to save her life, Eve decided to quickly find a way to let Haley release his pin-up energy. They searched their books for a long time but couldn't find any useful information. Eve angrily threw a book aside. What is all this nonsense? It's completely wrong. Eve couldn't understand why people summoned demons. It was either to conquer the world or for revenge, nothing normal at all. Haley beside her was speechless at Eve. You're the one who's not normal, who would summon a demon for everyday life. Eve frowned and sighed deeply. These books are absolutely useless. Haley immediately replied, starting a war would be simpler. Eve instantly refused. I'm trying to find a solution for you, don't be so discouraging. Okay? Hearing her words, Haley smirked, you're afraid I'll eat you, aren't you? Eve pointed at her neck and said, no one wants to be eaten. Haley was utterly exasperated. They don't really think I want to eat you as food, do you? Instead, she became the main villain who wanted to kill the heroine. Eve was originally a duke's daughter, stunningly beautiful but with a terrible temper. When she learned that her fiancé had also fallen at Catherine's feet, she decided to kill her rival to win back her lover's heart. Before vanishing, she left a message for the world. If anyone can call out my true name, I will ignite the blue fire for them. Eve didn't understand Haley's meaning. Do you want to drink blood then? I could give you a little. Why don't you take a sip first? Haley was stunned. He then turned away from Eve. Forget it. There's nothing to say to a little brat like you. Eve pouted. Even offering you blood isn't good enough. What do you want? Just then Eve suddenly heard shouting from outside the window. She stretched her head to look out. She saw a group of soldiers shouting. Eve was curious. Are they setting off to battle today? That means Lightning and Rots will have to stay here for another month. Realizing this, Eve started to worry again. She'd have to stay in her room for another month to avoid them. It was all because the flying dragons were too formidable. The next second, Eve had a flash of inspiration. She immediately asked Haley, are flying dragons really hard to deal with? Haley confirmed that's right. That's why humans can only attack when they're their weakest to smash their eggs. Eve smiled. How do you compare to flying dragons then? Haley looked at Eve with full confidence. Comparing flying dragons to me? You're really underestimating me. Satisfied with the answer, Eve raised her hand and spoke. Then I'll take you for a good, satisfying killing spree. These were the most formidable magical beasts, the flying dragons. Every year, a large army had to be sent to eradicate them, but they were being slaughtered in large numbers for no apparent reason. What was going on? Lighton spoke with great confusion. It's been going on for a week now. Those tough flying dragons are dying in large numbers every day. Rot said they were still investigating and had no results yet. Lighton had never experienced anything like this. He began to suspect if it was the work of a magical beast even more powerful than flying dragons, if that was the case. Haley asked questioningly, are you a descendant of Jelani? You don't look like one at all, Eve interrupted her. Before answering these questions, can I make a wish? I need the power of the blue fire. They would have to request support from the royal capital. Rot shares his thoughts. It shouldn't be. The corpse of the flying dragon had signs of being burned by fire. Lighton also had an idea. The use of fire proved it was an intelligent being. The opponent was likely not human. He suddenly looked at Rots. Rots was upright and honest. You shouldn't have any ulterior motives, but the royal family was a different story. In this country, the throne was usually inherited by the eldest son. However, after his mother's death, Lighton's position as crown prince was snatched away by Cashin. Although some factions still supported him, he was constantly restrained by the current queen. Even this dragon-slaying mission was deliberately arranged by the queen to catch Lighton in a trap. Now Leighton was extremely troubled. At this critical moment, a life far more powerful than dragons had appeared. He wondered how to deal with this situation. Meanwhile, Eve was sitting nearby, resting. Haley was using his firepower, continuously burning the dragon in front of him. The dragon let out agonizing screams. Haley was immersed in the thrill of killing. He was extremely excited, unleashing all his previously suppressed desires. He was slaughtering these dragons as if chopping vegetables. He thought to herself that Haley looked really happy. It seemed he was indeed extraordinary. Haley finished off another dragon. He smiled and said to Eve, shall we go? Eve was puzzled. You usually just stay here and don't want to leave. What's different today? Haley scratched his head and said sheepishly, you seemed a bit bored sitting there without saying anything. I was a bit worried. He was shocked. She didn't expect that in just a week, Haley had learned to care for others. Haley suddenly grinned mischievously. That's easy. Do you want money, fame, or what? Then Haley suddenly raised his voice. It's understandable if others are afraid of seeing me kill, but you're the most important person to me. You can't be afraid of me. As soon as he finished speaking, a huge figure suddenly appeared in front of them. The cruel demon kept killing. The dragon clan had been slaughtered to near extinction. The dragon leader could no longer bear it. Just a moment ago, Haley and Eve were talking when suddenly a massive creature flew in front of them. It was entirely purple, several times larger than an ordinary dragon, and kept exhaling at them. Eve was startled. Haley quickly embraced Eve in his arms. Eve asked fearfully, "What is that?" Haley was also confused. How did this guy come here? Eve was embarrassed. Such a huge monster must be a formidable opponent. The monster in front of them slowly spoke. "I am the dragon leader. Hello, human and demon." Eve politely replied hello, then she whispered to Haley, "Can dragons talk?" Haley immediately answered, "Only he is special. This guy is older than me and has long since gained sentience." The next second, the dragon leader approached Eve. "Demons are the same kind. Why do you slaughter each other?" Haley was very disdainful. "Does a demon need a reason to kill? Besides, you're a southern dragon. Did you come all this way just to tell me this?" The dragon leader stated it was because of his summoner. He felt a bit awkward. She hadn't expected a dragon to come and investigate this matter. She decided to explain it herself. "Demons have a long-term desire to kill. They lose their rationality, so I let him release his desires by killing dragons." Then she raised her hand dramatically. "Just tell me what you want. I'll use the blue fire to annihilate everything for you," Eve replied calmly. The dragon leader kept exhaling released desires. "There are other methods." Before he could finish, Haley interrupted. "He's still a kid. Don't meddle. Don't dragons have rules about protecting children too?" The dragon leader was shocked. He looked Eve up and down and finally concluded, "Indeed, children are off limits." The dragon leader kept nuzzling Eve's clothes with its head, but exterminating one's own kind was difficult. Why kill the dragon's clothes? Suddenly, Eve felt a pang of conscience. Initially, she had thought it wouldn't matter to clear out the dragons since they were affecting human life. Who knew they could actually speak? The dragon spoke pitifully. "Problem can be solved. Many baby dragons dead. Very sad." Haley suddenly raised his voice from the side. "I'm sad about not being able to kill too." Watching them argue, Eve felt utterly helpless. Although the urgent matter was to solve Haley's problem, the other party was a sentient being. Continuing like this would indeed be cruel. Eve glanced at the dragon leader. Seeing its pitiful expression with tears in its eyes, Eve's heart softened immediately. She decided on the spot to stop and spare these dragons. Before, this magical beast was the most formidable dragon leader, but now it had given its scale to a human, allowing them to command its kind at will. After receiving a satisfactory answer, the dragon leader handed Eve a scale. It told Eve that as long as she held its scale, its kind would obey. It was quite surprised holding the scale. Would the dragons really obey her commands just by holding the scale? The dragon leader kept nuzzling back and forth. It really liked Eve, thinking she was as cute as a little squirrel. Eve felt awkward. Squirrel should be a compliment, right? "Thank you." As soon as she finished speaking, the dragon leader turned around preparing to fly. "You're welcome. Starfish knows how to find me. Call if you need anything." After the dragon left, Haley was speechless. The starfish it mentioned couldn't be him, right? Her fantasy of needing the power of a sea of fire was instantly shattered. She was greatly surprised. "You've said to her, I want a light of fire to keep warm." Then he started shouting, "Summoner, why are you treating me like this? How could you favor him?" Eve waved her hand, comforting Haley helplessly. "This is also due to circumstances, you know. Of course I like you more. Let's keep looking for other solutions, okay?" Haley was about to die from feeling wronged. He kept glaring at Eve, feeling very upset. Eve could only quickly change the subject. She held up the dragon leader's scale. "Thanks to you, I got a treasure." Just then the scale suddenly emitted some strange sounds. As Eve was wondering what was happening, a group of dragons flew over from the sky. They directly surrounded Eve and Haley, but they had no intention of harming Eve. Instead, they crowded around Eve, nuzzling her intimately. The next second, a man fell to the ground. Eve and Haley turned around curiously to look. It turned out to be the guard, right? I was already scared out of his wits by this group of dragons, but he still stammered, saying he would definitely protect the young lady. Eve awkwardly spoke, "Your sword is over there." Rai looked at the distant sword, not daring to go and retrieve it. Then another group of people emerged. They were all holding swords, ready in defensive postures. "We will definitely protect the young lady." Eve was utterly speechless. She let out a long sigh. "What's going on? What was the point of me sneaking out then?" This woman was truly too lucky, transmigrating into the role of an infamous villainess. She not only gained a demon puppy, but also obtained the ability to command dragons. In the distant sky, Eve and Haley were sitting on the back of a dragon. But the wood here can't be ignited with ordinary fire. The dragon was carrying them, flying through the air, sometimes diving, sometimes accelerating, which excited Eve immensely. Haley asked curiously, "Aren't you scared?" Eve happily replied, "Not at all. This is too much fun." Sitting here is even more comfortable than riding in a carriage or on horseback. I wonder if we can utilize the dragon's ability to carry people. The dragon brought Eve back to the castle. The people below were terrified at the sight of the flying dragon. They shouted in fear, worried that the dragon might harm them. Eve stood in front of the dragon, addressing the guards loudly, "Don't hurt him." Lightning and Rots, who had rushed over, were also shocked. "What's going on here?" Eve, stroking the dragon's head, smiled and said, "Your Highness, may we speak privately for a moment? I'd like to introduce you to my new friend." Half an hour later, they gathered in the study. Light, not wanting to beat around the bush, asked, "Can you really control the dragon?" Eve replied, "Didn't you just see it for yourself?" However, Lighton still didn't believe Eve and questioned her again. Eve sighed, exasperated. "Do I have any reason to lie about something like this?" Lighton pondered for a moment before saying that he didn't want to report this solution to the royal family. Eve understood Lighton's meaning, so she decided to give the credit to Lighton. "Just report to the royal family that the dragon problem has been solved. That's all you need to do." Lighton was puzzled. This approach didn't seem to benefit her at all. But Eve flashed a stunningly beautiful smile. "This way I won't have to see those annoying people anymore. After all, I plan to spend the rest of my life here. So I had to summon you. Please hurry up. Once you've lit the fire, you can leave." If the dragon problem is solved, the royal family won't need to send troops to Aylor every year. Leighton was furious. He hadn't expected Eve to give him the credit for such a reason. Eve snorted coldly. "To be honest, I'm not thrilled about giving you the credit either. After all, you upset me not too long ago." As she spoke, Eve glanced at Leighton, recalling the plot from the novel. According to the original story, after Cashin inherited the throne, Leighton left the capital. A few months later, his body was discovered. It was likely that Cashin hadn't assassinated. In the entire novel, only Eve and Leighton died, so Eve had always considered him a kindred spirit. Leighton's voice brought her back from her thoughts. "Miss Eve, I agree to your proposal. Whether it's good or bad, I'm willing to give it a try." Eve responded, "Very well, but it's too late now. We'll discuss the details tomorrow." She then prepared to return to her room to rest, stretching lazily. As she turned her head, she saw Rot standing behind her. "Captain Rots, why did you follow me out?" The handsome captain of the knights, who had been bullied by his brothers since childhood, was unable to communicate with others. Yet, because of this woman's single compliment, he overcame his speech impediment. He was about to return to her room when she noticed Rots had followed her out. She asked what was going on. As soon as she asked, Eve regretted it. Rots was so quiet, he wouldn't answer her. To her surprise, Rots spoke up. "It's late. I can't let Ms. Eve walk back alone." Hearing his words, Eve was dumbfounded. "Oh my, your voice is so incredibly pleasant." Rots also froze in place. He hadn't expected Eve to say his voice sounded good. Haley froze on the spot. "I can't leave." She stepped closer to Eve. At this moment, Eve was already swooning. A handsome face with a deep voice, it was simply perfect. She curiously asked Rots, "Your voice is so nice. Why don't you talk more? If I had a voice like that, I'd be talking from dawn to dusk." Eve's words made Rots recall his childhood. The Rots family was a renowned knight family in the kingdom. As a young and weak child, he was often bullied by his brothers. Before his voice changed, they would always mock Rots' voice. At that time, Rots could do nothing but hide away and cry in secret. It wasn't until he grew up that he understood. Everything his brothers did was out of jealousy just because he was the heir to the Rots family. However, the trauma from his childhood was too great. Even after Rots grew taller and his voice deepened, he still couldn't communicate normally with others. Rot snapped back to reality and looked at the person before him. This was the first time someone had complimented his voice. For a moment I even thought he was mocking me, but now it seems he might be sincere. Eve looked at Rots and put on an expression as if she was about to cry. He immediately panicked. What was Rots trying to do? It was as if he had never been complimented before. He should have already heard compliments from Catherine and overcome his language barrier, right? Suddenly, Eve seemed to realize something. Rots overcoming his language barrier. Wasn't that after Catherine married the crown prince? Eve felt as if she had been struck by lightning. If that was true, hadn't she just made a huge mistake? Would you believe this demon who had lived for over 2,000 years? In front of him, she was like a little puppy. Just now, when Eve realized she had made a mistake, she desperately wanted to use magic to erase Rot's memory. Then she lowered her head and whispered in Eve's ear. They were so close they could hear each other's heartbeats. Haley smiled at Eve and said, "Don't you know? The person who summons a demon must sign a lifelong contract with a demon." But Haley said there was no such magic, so Eve could only awkwardly curtsy and then quickly excuse herself back to her room, leaving Rots alone standing there. He watched Eve's retreating figure, his face slightly flushed. He had developed some interest in Eve. In the room, Eve flopped face down onto the bed with a thud. She kept muttering about what had just happened. Never mind, Rots probably won't take the words of an evil side character to heart. Haley looked at her, puzzled. Then he laid down, facing Eve's summoner. I'm very angry now. Eve felt embarrassed. She had almost forgotten about that. She sat up and said, You've already killed so many paper dragons. Isn't that enough? Haley looked unhappy, but I can't kill any more in the future. Eve looked at his unhappy expression, feeling very helpless. She moved closer to Haley, gently comforting him. Don't be angry anymore, okay? But Haley suddenly turned his head to the other side, no longer looking at Eve. Eve wasn't about to give up. She kept trying to face Haley. They turned back and forth a few times before Eve finally gave in. Panting, she said, I'm so tired. How long are you going to stay angry? Haley, with his back to Eve, mumbled, compromising now feels like admitting defeat. One last time and I'll forgive you. This is the most naive woman I've ever seen. Summoning a demon just to light a fire for warmth, yet signing a lifelong contract. One round later, Eve was already lying exhausted on the bed. Beside her, Haley was using his magic to fan her. You've closed her eyes, thoroughly enjoying it. I know releasing your urges is important to you. I take this matter very seriously too. I will definitely help you find a solution. She looked at Haley and asked with some concern, How much longer can you hold out? Haley thought for a moment before answering, If I use magic, I can probably last for about a month. You've also felt anxious. If we don't find a method within a month, are you going to bite my neck off? Haley loudly refuted her words. What on earth are you imagining all day? He covered his head and let out a long sigh. You'd better focus on finding a solution. But about you giving the credit to the crown prince, do you have any plans? This is the most intelligent woman I've ever seen. She can actually tame flying dragons, the enemy of humans, and even wants to form a flying dragon knight squad. You've shared her plans with Haley. Currently, no one can ride on the back of a flying dragon, so I want to create a knight squad that uses flying dragons as mounts. Then everyone will believe that flying dragons can truly be tamed. Moreover, I have the dragon leader's scale. The dragon clan should agree to my request. This way, humans and dragons can coexist peacefully. However, we must use our own people for the flying dragon knight squad. The royal family can still obtain the leather and claws left behind after the dragons die naturally. For humans, catching a flying dragon is harder than reaching the sky, so this deal isn't a loss for the royal family at all. Besides, no one would doubt the loyalty of the Oberon family. The next day, Eve once again shared her thoughts with Lighton. Lighton expressed that this idea was excellent, even better than he had expected. Eve took a sip of tea. At this moment, Eve looked at the male lead Cassian in front of her, feeling very annoyed. This author really doesn't know how to pick men, she thought. Cassian was still blaming Eve, questioning why she wanted to harm Catherine. Eve sat in front of the lit fireplace, feeling her whole body come alive. Finally, it wasn't so cold anymore, feeling warm all over. She had the energy to joke. The blue fire wasn't as difficult as I imagined. Then please put in a good word for me when you report it. There's one more thing. If you have any issues with me, just come at me directly. Lighton didn't understand what Eve meant. He felt he was playing dumb and started to get angry. The Ochre Chamber of Commerce refusing to export timber to Alil. Don't tell me you don't know about it. Alil is such a cold place. How can they survive the winter without timber? Lighton became even more confused. What are you talking about? How could my uncle possibly give up such a profitable business for my sake? And as far as I know, it was Alil who decided to stop importing timber. Eve was stunned. Then, as if they both realized something, they said in unison, there must be something wrong here. Eve lowered her head and thought, if my family and your grandfather's family were to have a conflict, who would benefit from it? Light had already figured out who it might be. They were both smart people. Then he told Eve that he would go gather some intelligence. Eve immediately recalled a plot from the novel. Luke Light, the high-ranking leader of the underground intelligence organization, was someone he met during a trip. The two went through many hardships together and eventually became close friends who shared weal and woe. However, Luke was also one of Catherine's admirers. Eve pondered silently. If he was gonna ask Luke for information, it would definitely be reliable. Lighton stood up preparing to leave. You've helped me this time, I'll definitely repay you. Eve made an okay gesture. The best repayment is cold, hard cash. I hope you understand my meaning. This woman dressed as a villainous supporting character. Then she looked at Haley. Do demons have to fulfill the summoner's wishes for a lifetime? You're too easy to take advantage of. Haley quickly replied, the summoner has to exchange something like war or pleasure. For example, to become king, that guy gave me his first child. began to build a knight order with her own abilities, and even made her sworn enemy increase his goodwill towards her. Having resolved the issue with Leighton, Eve now had to focus on the main task. To form a flying dragon knight order, the knights certainly couldn't be afraid of dragons. He decided to let everyone try first, but the knights were too scared, not even daring to approach the dragons. They finally managed to climb onto the dragon's back, trembling all the while. Eve and the butler watching from the side were speechless, so they really couldn't even sit properly. Eve had originally thought that the fifth knight order she was forming could solve the dragon problem and also reduce local unemployment, but the butler quickly spoke up. These knights were chosen randomly. In such a remote village, the quality of personnel can only be this good. Eve wiped her sweat. After selecting for half a day, they were all as cowardly as Lana. At this moment, Leighton suddenly arrived. At this rate, you won't be able to train anything. Why not let the Royal Knight Order train with the dragons instead? Eve elbowed Leighton. Greed knows no bounds, huh? Then she realized her rudeness and quickly apologized to Leighton. Leighton said it was fine. He hadn't expected that they could joke around like friends. Eve waved her hand and moved away from him a bit. Don't get any ideas. We're not friends. Hearing her words, Leighton laughed heartily. Indeed, only you would talk like that. After these 2 days of interaction, Leighton's goodwill towards Eve had increased considerably. Suddenly, many voices could be heard from the side. You turn her head to look. It turned out a crowd of onlookers had gathered. However, you're the first person to summon me directly. How did you do it? Eve, of course, couldn't say she had read the original novel. She quickly changed the subject. Since I summoned you, I'll be responsible for you. After all, Leighton was the eye-catching crown prince. She'd better keep her distance. Then Eve quietly moved away from Leighton. Then took out an envelope and handed it to Eve. Eve looked puzzled. What is this? Leighton replied, this is my token of gratitude for you. As soon as he finished speaking, Eve unceremoniously accepted the envelope. The prince's efficiency was indeed impressive. She quickly began to open the envelope. As soon as Eve opened it, she was stunned. She looked at Leighton and asked incredulously, are you serious? This is the most generous man I've ever met. He had actually given her a blank check, allowing her to fill in any amount she wanted. He was shocked. You trust me too much. Aren't you afraid? I'll write an exorbitant amount. Leighton smiled and said, I believe you won't. Just write whatever you want. He was overjoyed. Indeed, this kind of tangible gratitude could truly be called a token of appreciation. She cheerfully said, so you trust me this much? Leighton answered her very seriously. When you went to the hot springs, didn't you ask me if bad people couldn't have a change of heart? You were right, although I've always believed that people don't change easily. Senior change made me realize I was wrong. Leighton stared at Eve and asked, do you have any plans to return to the capital soon? You said she didn't know. It wasn't something she could control. In the original story, the Duke hadn't called her back. Leighton nodded. He understood that if Eve returned now, she would certainly face criticism. However, he believed they would meet in the capital sooner or later. Hearing this, Haley stood up excitedly. Will you let me kill to my heart's content? But Eve simply stated, I'll only provide you with food and lodging. Then he said with a grin, this check can only be cashed at the main bank in the capital, you know? With that, he left. He was left fuming on the spot. You big liar, leave quickly, and don't let me see you again. Watching Leighton's retreating figure, Eve felt a bit melancholic. She had given him such a big gift. It should help Leighton survive in the end, right? Meanwhile, Leighton returned to the reception room. As soon as he entered, he was very displeased. I don't remember inviting any guests. A man kneeling on the ground quickly replied, it's Giant Moan's. He asked me to bring this letter to you. Giant Moan referred to the most capable information gatherer, also a respectful title for the leader of the underground intelligence organization. Hearing the man's words, Leighton understood it must be intelligence from Luke. He then asked the man if there was anything else. The man replied that there wasn't. Leighton then drew his sword. In that case, you're not sent by him, are you? As soon as he finished speaking, he thrust towards the man. The man pushed himself off the ground with his hands. A puff of smoke appeared. You're really going to cut me? When he raised his head again, his appearance had completely changed. The man now had short, neat red hair and eyes like an eagle staring at Leighton. How did you know it was me? Can you believe it? This seemingly innocent boy is actually the supreme leader of the underground intelligence organization. The red-haired man asked in confusion. How did you know it was me? Leighton laughed. Luke, you gave yourself away from the start. Haley knelt on the ground, very disappointed. That's too boring. You suddenly thought of something, she asked. So do you have to fulfill my wishes unconditionally? What if I wish for you to face the wall and reflect? Luke shouted angrily. But my disguise this time was flawless. Leighton spoke, holding the envelope. This letter is too thin. The matter I asked you to investigate can't be explained on a single sheet of paper. And it's not something that could be relayed through someone else. So the only person who could come with you, Luke cover his head helplessly, find you when, then Luke got down to business. The matter you entrusted me with is still under investigation. Leiden was very puzzled. If there were no leads on either matter, why had he come? Luke answered with a smile, why would I? The great giant moan come to such a small village. Of course, it's because there's something interesting. Meanwhile, he was grooming Haley in his dog form. She curiously asked why they were holding a celebration. Emma explained that it was mainly a farewell party for the troops sent from the capital, but the young miss could also go to relax. You've also felt she needed to go out and clear mind. Today, she had been infuriated by the night order, so she instructed Emma to take her out for a walk. Emma looked surprised, asking if the young miss really wanted to go with her. Hearing Emma's words, Eve thought she might already have plans. Unexpectedly, Emma said, don't you plan to go with as high as the prince? Eve didn't understand why she should go with Leiden. Emma was shocked by Eve's words. Young miss, how can you address the prince so casually by name? Eve waved her hand dismissively. Well, he's not here anyway, it's just like how you might talk about me behind my back, it's no big deal. Haley was completely helpless. How did she get summoned by someone like this? Eve stared at Haley, thinking to herself, this one is much more handsome than the crown prince. Emma passionately refuted Eve's words. I would never speak ill of you, young miss, neither to your face nor behind your back. Eve was about to comfort Emma when she heard her voice grow even louder. You have no idea how much I like you. Don't mind those who speak ill of you behind your back. Those people are just too dashed excessive, Emma continued, stating that Eve was the kindest person she had ever met. Receiving such praise, Eve felt happy inside. This was the first time since becoming Eve that she had been loved by someone. However, Emma still insisted that Eve should attend the festival with Leiden to showcase her status. Yet Eve refused again, saying she didn't need to rely on others because she was already dazzling enough. Just then, a voice called out, young miss, someone is here to see you. The man who had psychological trauma since childhood had completely overcome his speech impediment because of her few words. Just now, when Emma learned that Rotz had come to see Eve, she immediately started to groom and dress Eve up, not listening to Eve's explanations at all, even suggesting that the captain wasn't a bad choice either. Half an hour later, a well-dressed Eve walked up to Rotz. She apologized somewhat embarrassedly, sorry to keep you waiting. I was held up by something just now. Rotz was stunned by the beautiful Eve before him. Eve felt very awkward, wondering if he was angry for waiting too long. It took Ratsu a while to come to his senses, his ears slightly red. It's all right, I haven't been waiting long. Then he asked Eve if he was interrupting her plans to go out. Eve smiled. I was just planning to visit the festival. I can go after talking with you. Then Eve was surprised, wondering who she had just been talking to. She peered behind Rotz, asking, is there someone else back there? Then she slowly spoke, I want to make a wish. From now on, you must protect me. You can't abandon me in danger. These requests were very simple for Haley, so she agreed without hesitation. Then Hive looked at Rotz and joked, can you communicate normally now? Rotz nodded shyly. My voice isn't strange, is it? Hearing Rotz's words, Eve was shocked. Could it be that Rotz had overcome his speech impediment because of her? What about Catherine then? Cold sweat kept breaking out on Eve's face, and she felt very flustered inside. For Rotz, overcoming the speech impediment was the most crucial part of his storyline. Rotz's words interrupted Eve's thoughts. After watching the Dragon Knight training this morning, I remembered something. Since we're returning to the capital tomorrow, I took the liberty of disturbing you. Then he handed the book in his hand to Eve. This book introduces various horse equipment. The content should also be applicable to flying dragons. The two sat down and discussed continuously. Flying dragons are larger, so they would need a saddle. That's a good idea, but making a saddle would be quite difficult. At this moment, Haley in his dog form told Eve through mental communication, you can find the dwarf race to make it. As long as you provide the materials, there's nothing they can't create. However, dwarves don't like humans, so it's hard to find them. But once you do, it'll be easy. Eve praised Haley again, you're still the most capable. Haley also became proud. My wisdom is unmatched by anyone. After chatting for a while, Eve stood up, signaling it was time for Rotz to leave. Emma had just entered with a tray of tea. She noticed the two were preparing to leave and became excited. Finished chatting so soon? Well then, you two should hurry off on your date. This little maid was truly a godsend. She had successfully arranged a date between her young mistress and a man. Rotz, hearing Emma mention a date, was quite confused. Eve, panicking, denied it. I've already said it's not like that. Eve said somewhat embarrassedly, Also, you're too handsome. Can you change to a more low-key appearance? Hearing Eve's words, Haley moved closer to her. Eve felt a headache coming on. My maid has misunderstood. Don't mind her. She thinks you're here to date me. Hearing Eve's words, Rot's face immediately turned red. I thought you had plans with someone else. He was about to answer that she had plans with Emma, but was promptly interrupted by Emma, who stated that she and the young miss had no such arrangement. She excitedly spoke up, I won't be going. The young miss would be lonely by herself. Wouldn't she? Emma's face clearly spelled out 4 words. Ask her out quickly, but Rots, who was previously a shy boy who could barely speak, was now very nervous. Eve hurriedly said, don't listen to her nonsense. I don't mind. Rots mustered up his courage and earnestly asked Eve, Miss Eve, would you like to attend the festival with me? Eve was stunned but didn't have the heart to refuse Rot's invitation. The festival had already begun on the main street. Everywhere was filled with noisy chatter, very lively. It was Eve's first time attending such a festival, and she found it novel and fun. But with Rot's buyer's side, the atmosphere was very awkward. At this moment, Leighton approached. He greeted them with a smile. The sight of you two touring the festival together is quite strange, he responded somewhat exasperatedly. With you here, it's even stranger. Ignoring Eve's comment, Leighton put his hand on Rot's shoulder. Don't say that, but when we're out, just call me Eaton. Rot's immediately removed his hand. Using a fake name is no fun. Lying isn't a good habit. As they continued talking, they nearly started arguing. Eve, watching this scene, had only one thought in mind: to go home. Haley in dog form suddenly bit Eve's skirt as if trying to lead her away. Eve understood Haley's intention and left with him immediately. You think I'm handsome? She smiled happily, seeing how indifferent you were to me. I thought you couldn't see my beauty. As soon as she finished speaking, Haley stood up dramatically. You want a low-key appearance, right? Leighton and Rots were still arguing. Rots grabbed Leighton's collar. Don't think I don't know your Luke, or have you hidden the real prince? Impersonating royalty is a serious crime. Knowing he had been seen through, Luke decided to drop the act. Leighton is just asleep, let go of me already, but Rots wasn't willing to let him act recklessly. Luke chuckled, how did you become so eloquent when you were with Eve earlier? Weren't you all shy? Rots released him and told him not to meddle in others' affairs. Luke couldn't be bothered with much more. As long as you don't interfere with me, it's fine. As soon as he finished speaking, a fierce fire suddenly ignited in front of them. Can you believe it? This woman, notorious as a villainess, actually helped a little girl in distress. Leighton and Rots were shocked by the fire in front of them. What was going on? Just half an hour ago, even Haley had decided to explore on their own. They saw a street vendor shouting, place your bets, don't miss this chance to make money. Even immediately became interested. She hadn't expected to find a betting game here. Haley suddenly spoke up beside her, startling Eve. She was shocked. How did you turn back into human form? Haley snorted coldly, saying arrogantly, if I didn't change back, you'd really treat me like a dog. You looked down at Eve. Do you still think I'm your pet now? Say something. Haley's sudden closeness left Eve at a loss for words. Her face turned as red as a ripe tomato. How dare you use your handsome dog tactics on your master? Haley smiled. It seems the master really likes me, Eve replied nonchalantly. To be precise, he likes your face. Being attracted to someone's appearance is quite different from being attracted to their inner self. That's easy. Haley used transformation magic and turned into a white Samyad. Haley didn't understand Eve's meaning. Was there something wrong with his inner self? Eve said coolly, that's something you'll have to ask yourself. Hearing her words, Haley persisted, constantly pestering Eve to explain clearly. Eve sighed and said, let's not talk about this now. Then she patted Haley's shoulder and directed his attention to the vendor being confronted. A little girl was shouting, I saw you take the item with my own eyes. Give me back my money, the vendor scoffed. Do you have any proof? You couldn't stand it anymore. Cheating even children was truly despicable. She leaned close to Haley's ear and said she wanted to teach the vendor a lesson. Haley grinned mischievously. I have a simpler way to punish him. He then snapped his fingers and immediately a fire ignited on the vendor. Everyone around was startled. Haley looked like a child waiting for praise. However, Eve just wanted to leave quickly. It would be troublesome if they were seen. The two hurriedly ran into an alley to hide. Eve was panting heavily. The next moment, a hand grabbed Eve. Eve was so frightened she jumped straight into Haley's arms. It was an old woman in a cloak, slowly extending her hand. Miss, you dropped something. A woman who had transmigrated into the villain of a novel, while out shopping, encountered a strange old woman who said she had dropped something. Eve looked at the old woman in front of her, very surprised. She hadn't dropped anything. Then the old woman extended her hand and in her palm lay a ring. Eve said this wasn't her ring, but the old woman insisted she look carefully, saying it was indeed hers. Then she pushed the ring into Eve's hand. However, Eve had already changed her heart. She only wanted to live an easy life as a palace maid. Eve cheerfully said to Cashin, "Then let's break off our engagement. This way I can live a quiet life." It happily stuck out its tongue and pounced on Eve's legs. "Is this okay now?" Eve thought this big dog was incredibly cute. Eve examined the ring carefully and her eyes widened in shock. How could this ring be here? She recalled her previous life. Eve had bought this ring from an antique stall. The vendor had said it was an antique. It was said to be inlaid with the heart of the sun god. After buying the ring on her way back, she had encountered a plane crash. When she woke up again, she had become Eve. She snapped back to reality, wanted to ask the old woman why she had this ring, but the old woman had vanished. So Eve could only return to the mansion with a head full of questions. She kept turning the ring over and over. Her head felt like it was about to explode. Was this really the sun god's ring? It looked exactly the same. The size was also just right. Moreover, Haley also thought there was something odd about this ring. Eve kept rocking in her chair, unable to make sense of it all. Just then Emma came over. "The Royal Night Order is about to depart. Don't you want to see them off, miss?" Eve was puzzled. Why should I go see them off? Emma suggested, "At least say goodbye to Rots. After the explosion at yesterday's celebration, he searched for you for quite a while." Haley in dog form stared intently at Emma. She couldn't help but reach out to Pat's head, but Haley shook her off. "You're really treating me like a dog now." Then he communicated with Eve telepathically, "Be careful. This person isn't Emma. Emma's blood doesn't smell like this." Eve was stunned. She silently speculated if someone had transformed into Emma's appearance. After all, Emma didn't have a twin sister. Emma continued speaking. Eve's thoughts had already drifted far away. She looked at Emma in front of her and suddenly remembered. The person who could use transformation magic was none other than Luke, the leader of the intelligence organization. This maid in front of her was actually a man in disguise. He saw through her immediately and even toyed with her a bit. Eve looked at Luke, who was disguised as Emma, standing before her. She knew very well that Leighton must have asked him to investigate the Merchant Guild's affairs. Luke found it interesting, so he came in person. Intelligence organizations don't kill people, so Emma was probably just knocked unconscious. Eve had something to ask him about, but before getting to the point, she suddenly had a mischievous idea. She wanted to tease Luke a bit. Eve suddenly stretched out her foot towards Luke. "My feet are so sore." Luke was shocked. What was this woman trying to do? Then you've covered her mouth and giggled. "Can you massage my feet? I love it when you do that." Seeing Luke's panicked expression, Eve was overjoyed inside. After all, Luke hated Eve so much, he must be in a real panic now. Haley lay on the ground, ignoring Eve. She suddenly thought of a problem. How are we going to explain this fire to others? This woman had become the main villain from the novel, but she was a useless mage. Luke, who held secrets of countless people and was highly respected in the intelligence world. How could he possibly massage my feet? Eve watched Luke with great interest, wondering how long he could keep up the act. In this world, massaging someone's feet was a sign of submission. This proud leader of the intelligence organization would, however, to Eve's surprise, Luke agreed immediately. "I'll massage them right away." Now it was Eve's turn to panic. "What, you're really going to massage my feet?" Luke crouched down, lifted Eve's foot, and took off her shoe. Then he began massaging her foot. "Don't you find life in Alyr a bit boring? You've lived in the bustling capital since childhood. After coming to Alyr, you can't even attend balls anymore." By now, Eve was starting to feel drowsy. His massage skills were too good. If this person wasn't Luke himself, she would definitely hire him as a personal masseuse. Eve replied nonchalantly. "A quiet life is quite nice too," Luke chuckled. "Your adaptability is truly impressive. Even more admirable is your ability to tame flying dragons." Hearing Luke's words, Eve couldn't help but think to herself, is Luke trying to inquire about the flying dragons? Eve had an idea. She pretended to be indifferent. "Actually, taming flying dragons isn't that difficult. You're my personal maid, so I don't mind telling you the secret to taming flying dragons." This man disguised as a maid wanted to know how to tame flying dragons, but he didn't expect to be toyed with instead. Upon learning that Eve was going to tell him how to tame flying dragons, Luke was extremely excited inside, but on the surface, he remained calm and said, "How could you tell me something so important?" Eve raised an eyebrow. "Come on, we're close, aren't we?" Her internal magic power was less than one. The two were thinking about how to explain the fire. "It's fine." Then she leaned close to Luke's ear. "Actually, the secret to taming flying dragons is singing. Flying dragons are very sensitive to sound. They'll start talking as soon as they hear singing, but only one song works on them." Luke quickly asked which song it was. Then Eve smiled and sang a song to Luke. The lyrics were just, "Luke is a big fool." Eve laughed heartily. "Still don't get it? You've been tricked." Luke slowly got up from the ground. He immediately dropped his disguise and looked at his hands angrily. "They're so dirty now." Then he spoke to Eve. "This is the first time you've seen through my disguise." Eve replied nonchalantly, "People improve, you know. You came at the right time. I have something important to discuss with you." Luke glared at Eve angrily. "What important business could you have? By the way, how did you know it was me?" Eve said it was a trade secret and that she wanted to commission him to investigate something. Before Eve could say what it was, Luke refused. Eve smiled sweetly and took out the blank check Light and had given her. "Don't be so hasty. This is a blank check. If you can handle this matter, you can fill in any amount you want." Since it wasn't her own money, Eve was being particularly generous. Luke was also shocked by Eve's grand gesture. "Since you're so sincere, I'll listen. But if it's about Catherine, no amount of money will work." So Eve entrusted Luke with the difficult task of finding the dwarf race. As it turned out, both Luke's efficiency and the power of a blank check were not to be underestimated. The dwarf race was living in seclusion in the Misty Mountains in the northwest of the continent. Haley looked at the map and recalled previous events. The person who summoned him had been to the Misty Mountains. He was also curious about Jolini's ancestor. What did he go there for? Eve confidently spoke up, "Don't forget I'm a mage." Haley looked at her disdainfully. "Your magic power is only 0.5, right?" Haley explained, "There's a holy sword called Ubit stuck in the Misty Mountains. He wanted to pull out that holy sword at the time, but in the end he couldn't." The next day after getting dressed, Eve said to Emma, "We're about to leave. Don't let anyone know we're gone." Emma was very worried. "Are you really planning to go alone? Isn't that too dangerous?" Hearing her words, Eve assured her not to worry and then picked up Haley in his dog form. "Actually, he's an elf who can use magic." Oh my, this beautiful woman had transmigrated into the villainess of a novel. But she didn't think about being a green tea bitch or expanding her harem. Instead, she was focused on finding dwarves to form a flying dragon knight order. Just now, Eve had told Emma about Haley's ability to use magic. Haley was a bit worried. Is it okay to tell Emma directly? Eve thought Emma was very trustworthy and asked Haley to greet her. Just as Haley was about to greet Emma, she fell to the ground in shock. The dog could talk. Eve was also a bit embarrassed. "I scared you, didn't I?" After giving instructions to Emma, the two set off for the Misty Mountains. Eve and Haley were searching nonstop. Haley sensed the smell of smoke nearby. The dwarf village should be not far away. Eve, eating a biscuit, suggested they split up the search and asked Haley if he wanted a biscuit. Haley looked at the crumbs at the corner of Eve's mouth, wiped them with his finger, and then licked his finger. He smirked and said, "Tastes good. Let's split up. If anything happens, just call my name." As soon as he finished speaking, Haley disappeared. Eve walked slowly by herself. She kept pondering what method the dwarves might use to hide their village. In this world from mages, the higher the magic power, the stronger they were, and it couldn't be increased through training. Eve's magic power had been 0.5 since birth. That pitiful amount of magic couldn't even light a candle. Could it be a spell or a maze, or maybe they set up a magical passage? He was so lost in thought that she didn't watch her step and tripped. She sat on the ground, feeling the pain in her leg. Eve turned her head to see what had tripped her and saw a sword stuck in the ground. Who threw a sword here? If I leave it, someone else might trip. I might as well pull it out. Then Eve reached out and pulled the sword out. This sword is so dirty. What if someone gets cut and gets tetanus? Just as she was about to take a closer look, she noticed the sword emitting a golden light. It also spoke, "Master, I've been waiting for you for a long time. Let me introduce myself." I'm a dash before it could finish. Eve threw it away. Eve was startled. She never thought a sword would have a ghost too. She wondered if demons could exorcise ghosts. The sword thrown aside continued speaking, "My name is Ubit. People also call me the Holy Sword." This was the luckiest woman he had ever seen. Not only did she summon a demon as a pet, but she was also recognized as the master by the famous Holy Sword. Just now, Eve learned that the sword she casually pulled out was the Holy Sword Ubit, but she still couldn't believe it. "I heard the Holy Sword couldn't be pulled out at all." Ubit spoke arrogantly. "Indeed, those unworthy can't do it." "But you're different, Master. Please take me with you." Eve reluctantly agreed. She then wrapped the holy sword in a handkerchief and picked it up. In comparison, Catherine was a magical prodigy with a magic power of 9. At this moment, Eve was stroking Haley's belly. "So what? I'm still a duchess," she said. Ubit, confused, asked its master, "Why are you keeping such a distance from me?" Yub replied nonchalantly, "I'm afraid of tetanus if you cut me." The next moment, someone came running from afar who pulled out Ubit. Ubit was dumbfounded. What was this now? A small, blonde dwarf holding a hammer stood in front of Ubit. Was it Ubit pulled out? Ubit replied awkwardly, if you're referring to this sword then yes, I did pull it out. The little dwarf was so shocked that he stood there unable to speak. At this moment, Eve was very nervous. He's not going to hit me with that hammer and steal the holy sword, is he? Haley helped. Unexpectedly, the little dwarf suddenly grabbed Eve. Come with me to the dwarf village. Eve said she could, but she needed to call her companion first. The little dwarf quickly interjected, you mean that arrogant white-haired boy? He's already in our village. 10 minutes later, Eve arrived at the dwarf village with the little dwarf. She asked the dwarf in front of her, can you explain now? The dwarf looked at Ubit in front of him and slowly began to speak. This sword was the pride of their dwarf race, but Ubit refused to be controlled by anyone. It only wanted to wait for the master it would acknowledge, who knew that in the long years, not a single person could gain its approval. So they had no choice but to stay here and accompany it, waiting for its master. Now its master had finally appeared. The dwarf excitedly said to Eve, please let us take on the task of repairing Ubit. Eve nodded, then I'll leave it to you. In its current state, it can't be used without repairs anyway. Lady Haley was speechless. She couldn't believe Eve thought others would be so easily fooled. Half an hour later, the servants were all surprised to see the burning fireplace. Eve calmly spoke, however, I have one condition, a woman dressed as the infamous Villainess. But instead of fighting scumbags or green tea bitches, she traveled far and wide to find the dwarf group. Just now, Eve made her request to the little dwarf. I want to hire a blacksmith from your village. The task of repairing Ubit can be given to him as well. The dwarf asked, does the blacksmith need to go to a human village? Eve nodded, and the little dwarf fell into deep thought. Eve understood that the dwarf race didn't like to interact with the outside world. This condition seemed to be a bit difficult for them. After pondering for a while, the dwarf said he needed to discuss it with his people first. He couldn't decide on this matter alone. Eve expressed her understanding and went with Haley to wait at the village entrance. The two were waiting at the entrance when Haley, also curious, asked if the dwarf race would agree to this request. Eve, resting her chin on her hand, replied they probably will. After all, they've been guarding this place just to repair Ubit. If they really don't want to, we can use a flying dragon for transportation. Just then the little dwarf came over. A dwarf with a ponytail introduced himself. I'm Labasius, the best blacksmith in this village. Eve smiled and greeted him, saying she could just be called Eve. Labasius then asked, I heard you have an interesting job for me to do. We never thought black ironwood could be ignited. The young lady is truly amazing. Eve graciously accepted their praise. She smiled happily. I tried my best. I didn't expect it to actually light up. It seems my magic is quite powerful after all. Eve nodded. I want you to make a saddle for a flying dragon. Labasius was incredulous. Can flying dragons be ridden too? Eve laughed and replied, I came here riding a flying dragon, but without a saddle, it's very uncomfortable. Labasius immediately expressed great interest in this task. He was also very happy. She didn't expect them to agree to her request so easily. However, repairing Ubit would take half a month, so she and Haley decided to return to Ilia to wait. With that, they bid farewell. The dwarf rode away on the flying dragon. Eve couldn't help but marvel at her luck while on the dragon's back. Not only had she found the dwarf race, but she had also unexpectedly obtained the holy sword. However, Haley seemed a bit gloomy. Eve nuzzled Haley's chin with her head, asking what was wrong. Haley spoke unhappily. This isn't fair at all. Why did you let a stranger call you by your name directly? I haven't even called you that yet. Eve was puzzled. Don't you know my name? You can just call me directly. Why be so shy about it? Hearing her words, Haley's face turned red. She shyly called Eve's name once. Then she buried her head in Eve's neck. Eve stroked her head. She responded loudly, this woman is really lucky. Isn't she? Not only did she find the dwarf to help make flying dragon equipment, but she also accidentally discovered the precious magic wood. After returning to Alir, Eve had a blacksmith shop prepared for Labasius. Not long after, Labasius came with a brand new Ubit. During this time, the Night Order's training also got on track. Everything was progressing smoothly. However, there was still a big problem. Mithril was needed to make dragon armor. Mithril is a very precious metal. At this point, everyone also noticed the dog by her side. Eve answered, it's a stray dog I picked up. Extremely expensive, the funding issue was the biggest challenge. In the study, Labasius held up the black ironwood and exclaimed, Eve, what is this? You've pointed to the side. This is a specialty of our territory. There's a lot in the forest next to the black ironwood. Labasius was even more surprised. You have a lot of this in your village. You put the wood on the table. This is magic gold wood. Magic goldstone is a kind of stone containing magical power, usually used by magicians as a tool to initiate magic. And in this country, there's only one magic crystal stone mine. The cost of mining and transportation is extremely high. This is also why Cashin had to look for other mines after losing the support of the Oberon family. Unexpectedly, substances containing magical power are not just magic crystal stones. Yves de la Beige's incredulously, "Are you sure?" Labasius answered very confidently. "I'm the best blacksmith, I definitely won't misjudge. The reason it can't be ignited is because of the magical power's obstruction." Labasius said he had a way to verify it. First, squeeze out the juice of the black ironwood. After the juice solidifies, it will form a blue key. Then just embed the blue key into a magical tool and we'll know for sure. Eve also became excited. If the black ironwood was really magic goldwood, then the poor Alia would undergo a dramatic change. As soon as she finished speaking, Eve stood up to leave. She turned back to Cashin, revealing a stunningly beautiful smile. "Let's not meet again in the future." "I want to adopt it," the butler was puzzled. Wouldn't a smaller dog be better? Hearing the butler's words, Eve immediately picked up the dog. As for Eve, she would definitely be troubled. Eve's head was already spinning. The greater the benefits, the more likely to attract unnecessary trouble, but money still needed to be made. Otherwise, what would they use to buy supplies? You've suddenly had an idea, such a complex problem. She could hand it over to her rich father to deal with. The discovery of magic goldwood was such a big deal. Of course, it should be reported to the Duke to handle. He was completely immersed in her beautiful fantasy. At that time, as a meritorious official, she would surely receive a hefty reward. This plan was perfect. 2 days later, the results of Labasius' experiment came out. Eve looked at the dazzling magic crystal in front of her, feeling very happy inside. So this really was magic crystal wood. This was truly a unique noble lady. While others were out shopping and attending balls, she had to learn swordsmanship. Just a few days ago, Eve had sent all the blue keys refined by Labasius to the Duke. While waiting for news from the Duke, she decided to learn some swordsmanship. At this moment, Eve looked at Ryan in front of her, feeling speechless. "Did they really send you to teach me?" Rye happily replied, "I volunteered to teach you. I'm delighted to serve you, Mississippi." You felt a bit helpless, but she understood. Regular training was already exhausting enough. Who would want to spend extra time serving a noble lady? However, Rye was also too reckless.